All right, good afternoon. As you know, the Secretary-General, Antonio Guterres, is in France today, where he is about to attend a working dinner hosted by French President Emmanuel Macron, along with the leaders of Burkina Faso, Chad, Mali, Mauritania, and Niger, otherwise known as the G5 Sahel countries. At the dinner held in the city of Pau, aims to address the crisis in the Sahel by strengthening the international engagement and collaboration on security, governance, humanitarian, and development issues. The European Union's Josep Borrell, Charles Michel of the European Council, the African Union's Moussa Faki, and Louise Mushikiwabo of the International Organization of the Francophonie are also attending the dinner. On Saturday, the Secretary-General was in Portugal, as we told you, where he took part in the ceremony to mark Lisbon's designation as the 2020 European Green Capital. In his remarks, he said humanity had been waging a, quote, suicidal war against nature, and emphasized that 2020 should be the year to tackle climate change. And the Secretary-General will be on his way back to New York tomorrow morning. Back here in the Security Council, the Special Representative on Colombia, Carlos Ruiz Massieu, briefed Council members, and he said that last year Colombia continued making significant strides in the peace process. Mr. Ruiz Massieu, who is the Secretary-General's Special Representative, stressed that these hard-won gains must be protected and built upon through the comprehensive implementation of the peace agreement, and he encouraged parties to deepen their dialogue to be able to implement this agreement. Regarding the recent violence in some communities, Mr. Ruiz Massieu said peace will not be fully achieved if the voices of social leaders continue to be silenced and if former combatants who laid down their weapons and are committed to their reintegration continue to be killed. He called for the perpetrators of these attacks to be brought to justice and for more effective measures to protect these people and their communities. Turning to Syria, we remain deeply concerned about the safety and protection of 3 million civilians in Idlib in northwest Syria, over half of whom are internally displaced, following continued reports of airstrikes and shelling over the weekend. While a ceasefire that went into effect on January 12th has reportedly resulted in a degree of intensive airstrikes on January 11th in towns in the areas reportedly resulted in the death of 21 people, including 8 children and 5 women, and the destruction of civilian infrastructure. Dozens more people were injured. Many of them were women and children. The UN urges all parties and those with influence over those parties to ensure the protection of civilians and civilian infrastructure in line with their obligations under international humanitarian law. And turning to Yemen, the humanitarian operation in Yemen remains the largest in the world, with 24 million people, about 80% of the population, in need of life-saving support. About 7.4 million people need nutrition assistance, including 2.1 million children under the age of 5, and 1.1 million pregnant and breastfeeding women who need acute malnutrition treatment. As of January 8th, almost 861,000 suspected cholera cases had been reported since 2019, impacting 324 of Yemen's 333 districts. Some 3.6 million people are internally displaced, with nearly 400,000 newly displaced in 2019 alone. And also to note, the Security Council this morning renewed the mandate of the UN mission in support of the Hodeidah Agreement for a further 6 months. And on to the Philippines, and I can tell you that we are in touch with the government, which is leading the response to the Taal volcano eruption in the Calabarzon region, some 70 kilometers south of the capital, Manila. Our humanitarian colleagues tell us that 18,000 people have taken shelter in evacuation centers, with the number expected to rise. The Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, along with the UN Migration Agency, IOM, have teams in the field providing technical advice to the government. These teams will visit evacuation centers and review the needs and support of the Philippines authorities. OCHA commends the government's swift assistance to those impacted by the volcanic eruption. The UN's humanitarian country team stands ready to provide additional support as needed or requested. And the World Health Organization said today it is working with officials in both Thailand and China after reports of the new coronavirus was confirmed in one person in Thailand. The person traveled to Thailand from Wuhan, China, is now recovering from their illness. WHO says the case being identified in another country reinforces why the agency is calling for ongoing active monitoring and preparedness. WHO has guidance on how to detect and treat people who are ill with the new virus. China has shared genetic sequencing, which allows countries to rapidly diagnose patients. WHO also stresses it is essential that investigations continue in China to identify the outbreak. Dr. Tedros, the WHO Director General, will consult with the members of WHO's Emergency Committee. And yesterday, Haiti marked the 10th anniversary of the earthquake that killed hundreds of thousands of people, including 102 of our own UN colleagues. In Port-au-Prince at 4:30 p.m. in the afternoon, UN staff gathered for a ceremony on the site of the Christopher Hotel, the former headquarters of the peacekeeping mission, which, as you will recall, collapsed during the earthquake. In a press statement issued on behalf of the UN country team, Helen Lalim, the head of the UN political mission, said that while we honor the victims, the commemoration of this tragic event must also be a source of renewed engagement and call to unite behind a vision of a stable, democratic, inclusive, and prosperous Haiti. She reiterated the UN's continued commitment to support the population and leaders of Haiti to fulfill these aspirations. And as we mentioned on Friday, there'll be other events to mark the anniversary throughout the week. In Tunis today, the UN inaugurated the Hedi Anabi Hall, honoring the memory of the head of the UN mission who perished in the earthquake, Hedi Anabi, who was also a long-time Assistant Secretary General for Peacekeeping Operations. Commemorations are also planned in Geneva on Wednesday, and the Secretary General will host a commemoration here event on Friday. And over the weekend, we issued statements saying that the Secretary General was concerned about increased tensions in Western Sahara as the Africa Echo race was about to cross Gergerat. The Secretary General calls on all actors to exercise maximum restraint and to diffuse any tensions. We also issued a statement in which the Secretary General extended his profound condolences to the royal family, the government, and people of Oman on the passing of His Majesty Sultan Qaboos bin Said. The Sultan led Oman for 50 years and spearheaded the transformation of Oman into a prosperous and stable country. Two other things I want to flag for those of you who are interested and fascinated by the work of the Security Council, as we all should be. Our good friends in the Security Council Affairs Division has come out with the latest edition of its online flagship publication, 2019 Highlights of Security Council Practices. This year's edition has been published in a brand new platform leveraging new technologies in visual design, as well as an extended scope of data to enhance user interactivity and engagement. This year's edition includes data on the meetings of the Security Council dating back to 1946. The report is now available through the website of the Security Council Affairs. It's a really neat report. Lastly, on Friday, at this very podium, I flagged the updated Article 19 list, which had been published as an official document. This morning, I was advised by the Comptroller of the United Nations, who confirmed that Lebanon has just made a payment. With this payment, Lebanon's voting rights have been fully restored under Article 19, and we are glad of this news. Madame.
Thank you, Stéphane. Following up on this, Lebanon is due to the United Nations General Assembly. What is the amount due that
I'll have to
receive?
Get you exactly the amount that was paid, but it was sufficient to cover the amount needed to have the full voting rights. You know, and I should also mention that the Secretariat had been in touch for the last few weeks with the permanent mission of Lebanon to the United Nations in order to help them make the required payments, and we fully recognize that the recent events in Lebanon have challenged the banking system, delaying part of this money.
And what kind of procedure the Lebanon has to follow?
Well, it's not. I mean, the amount that was needed to get off the Article 19 list has been paid. We have officially informed, the Comptroller has written to the General Assembly Affairs Division to tell them that Lebanon is no longer under Article 19, so
can vote.
They can vote. There was a new official document under Article 19 has been published, and Lebanon is not on it.
Thank you.
Ali, and then Edie, and then Errol.
Thank you. First, follow up on Sylvian's question. So, on what are the years that Lebanon was not paying? My understanding from the Lebanese authorities, they said that they paid 2018. So they shouldn't be put subject to Article 19 because there was no...
What is important is that a payment was made. Article 19 does not apply to Lebanon. Lebanon has its full voting rights. In the procedure is laid out in the charter, and I can give you a bit more details offline.
My question is on Western Sahara. So what was the main concerns for the Secretary-General to issue his latest statement about the situation, especially in the Gargarat? And what are the reasons for that bars the Secretary-General from appointing a new special envoy, personal envoy to Western Sahara, since this issue has been lagging for more than 6 months?
I understand. There's no reason that bars him. The search is ongoing, and when we have someone to announce, we will do so. I think for us, today, on Monday morning, we're pleased to note that the Africa Echo race passed through Gergerat peacefully today, and we had called for we had called for everyone to exercise maximum restraint, diffuse any tensions, and we're glad the race went through without any incident. We continue to be committed to supporting the parties to reach a just, lasting, and mutually acceptable political solution to the conflict in accordance with Security Council resolutions. Edie.
Thank you, Steph. Did the United Nations have any representative at the ceasefire talks in Moscow between General Haftar and President Siraj? Was Qassem Salameh?
No, Mr. Salameh was not present in Moscow. We're obviously following the developments in Moscow and are hopeful that these positive steps, that these are possible steps that will lead to the convening of the International Conference on Libya in Berlin, which is in line with the 3 steps that Mr. Salameh had outlined. And we continue to stress that all international efforts to support Libya should be complementary and in support of the Berlin process.
And as a follow-up on a separate subject, many of us noted that the escalators between the 2nd and 4th floor have reopened. Does this mean that all the other limit restrictions that were put in place are also being lifted?
Let us take a joint pledge that this is the last time we will ever mention the E word in this briefing. I was happy and surprised that the escalators were turned back on Friday. I didn't expect it to happen so quickly, but just proves to show you once again that I don't know whatever's going on in this building. The other restrictions have not yet been lifted. Some will, some won't, but I hope to give you some update at some point. Maggie, and then to the front row.
Steph, I missed your first item. Was it by any chance a statement from the Secretary-General on violence in Iran against protesters?
No, on Iran, all I can tell you is that we're obviously following very closely the demonstrations that have been taking place today and over the weekend in Iran. And the Secretary-General recalls the rights to freedom of expression and association and peaceful assembly of people.
But does he have any comment on the fact that some protesters are being shot in the back?
I think these
excessive use of force?
we've seen these reports. We're not able to confirm them independently. We've seen the reports, which are clearly worrying, and I think it's important that as in any demonstration, reports of lethal use of force be fully investigated. Errol and then James.
Thank you, Steph. I asked you on Friday on the upholding of the Charter. You said that the Secretary General he likes that. Actually, he believes that every state actually is happy with the Charter, is supporting of the Charter. So my first question, I have two on this issue. My first question is, does the Secretary General believe that every single state is really upholding the Charter?
Well, I think that's what I think every state that spoke, every representative that spoke, I think underscored their own importance to the Charter. Your second question.
Yes, on Charter as well. As you know, the U.S. said it will not comply with the vote of the Iraqi parliament to withdraw, to get out their troops from Iraq, some 5,000 or so. So what does the Secretary General think? Is this a violation of the sovereignty of the state and upholding of the Charter as well?
The status, as far as I understand, the status of U.S. forces in Iraq is under the status of forces agreement, which is negotiated bilaterally between Iraq and the United States, and those discussions should take place between the United States and Iraq.
And this is upholding of the Charter?
That's what I'm telling you at this point. Yes, James.
Follow-up questions on what's happened in Moscow with regard to the Libya peace process. And some diplomats I've spoken to see a parallel with Syria, that Russia and Turkey are in the driving seat and the UN really isn't in control of the process.
Look, I think that sounds like a great question to ask a number of analysts on your show. The UN cannot operate in a vacuum, right? What is always important, whether it's in Syria or Libya, and those are different cases, right? I mean, whether it's in Syria or in Libya, a political process cannot move forward without the will of the people being represented. But also, we need to be realistic without involvement of not only of the parties who are fighting on the ground, but of the parties outside of the country who have an influence. What is important is that what is happening in Moscow feeds into Berlin. If it helps us get to Berlin, if it helps us get the three-pronged process, which as far as G7 had laid out, then I think it's all to be welcomed. It's not a parallel. What's important for us is that these efforts be an impetus and a push for the UN political process.
And with regard to Berlin, there are reports coming from various capitals that Berlin will happen on the 19th, this coming Sunday. Can you tell us any more about that summit? At what level will it be? How long will it take place? What is the scope of the discussions, and will the SG be attending?
We expect to have, the Moscow meeting is just ending as we speak. I hope to have some more for you either later today or tomorrow, and I do expect some official announcement on that end. Madame.
Hello, my name is Shapari Taxel from Independent Persian. I have two questions, if I may. One is regarding the Ukrainian foreign minister has recently said that there will be a meeting on Thursday in London with the foreign ministers of the other countries whose nationals died in the Ukraine plane crash. I was wondering whether or not the Ukrainian mission has approached the SG's office to play any role.
No, I'm not aware of it. I mean, we've obviously seen the news over the weekend. We've taken note of the announcement by the government of the Islamic Republic of Iran that the Ukrainian air charter was, quote, unintentionally shot down by the Iranian armed forces. For our part, I think it's very important that the authorities ensure a thorough and transparent investigation into what happened, into this tragic incident, and that the investigation, and this is very important, be done in accordance with Annex 13 on the Convention on International Civil Aviation, with the involvement of the relevant countries impacted.
Please? Sorry. About the British ambassador's arrest in Iran a few hours, whether the SG has a position on this.
Look, as a matter of principle, we believe that the 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations should be respected by everyone involved. Alan.
Thank you, Stéphane. A little follow-up on Libya negotiations in Moscow. As far as I understood, there was presented some kind of a draft of ceasefire agreement there, which was signed by Sarraj, but wasn't signed yet by Haftar. And he asked an additional time till tomorrow morning to decide.
As I said, we're not in Moscow. So Mr. Salameh is not in Moscow. So I don't have any more details in terms of the minute by minute what may be going on as we speak. We've seen reports that parties have accepted the ceasefire. We welcome that. I think what is important is that once everything has been signed, is that all the parties fully follow the ceasefire and enable the peaceful way to address their differences. Yep.
Thanks, Stéphane. It's a question on cross-border aid in Syria. Obviously, on Friday, the Council changed the mandate, closed a couple of those border crossings. Can you give us an update and tell us what's been happening on the ground over the weekend? Are those two crossings, are they now, as far as you're concerned, closed and no longer functioning? And have you worked out any other way to get aid to the people in the area?
At this point, we've taken note of the Council's decision on the cross borders. We will obviously be guided by the Security Council's instructions and mandate that is given to us. Crossing points that have not been mandated or renewed will not be used, and the crossing points that have been used will be used. We're obviously constantly looking at the best possible way to get aid to the people who need it. Nabil and then Maggie.
Thank you, Steph. Back to Libya, I would like to know what do you think about countries, influential countries, supporting what looks like parallel peace talks or ceasefire talks rather than supporting the UN process in Libya. And we see this that also happened in other conflicts in the region.
Sounds very much like the question James just asked. What I can tell you, we're not seeing this as competition. What is important is that all international efforts to bring peace to Libya should be complementary and supporting of the Berlin process. And we have no reason to believe that it's not. Maggie.
Following up on James's Syria question, during the council meeting Friday, several members mentioned that there were between 8 and 10 trucks coming from Erbil. They were at Yarabia waiting to cross. So that was one of the border points that was closed. Do you know if they were able to get any of that aid in? Do you know what happened to it?
I don't have any update.
Could you try and get us one?
That I can promise to do.
Thank you.
To try. All right. On that note, happiest of Mondays, and maybe we'll see each other mañana.